Good morning. It's Wednesday, April the 14th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. My name is Ron, and I'm the only true conservative in the United States today. And now, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. The Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April 14th. Let every strategy of hell be exposed. Do not fear the strategies of hell that the enemy plans against you, for in the light of my righteousness they will all be exposed. There will be no prospect of success for the evil man, and the lamp of the wicked will be put out. Though the evil one plots against my just servants and gnashes at them with his wicked teeth, I laugh at him, because his day is coming, and his own sword will pierce his wicked heart, and I will break his arm from bringing destruction upon you. I will be your stronghold in the day of trouble, for I know those who place their trust in me. Prayer declaration. Father, in the light of your righteousness, every strategy of hell has been exposed and brought into light. I am delivered from every satanic trap and plot against me. Let the nets that they have hidden catch themselves, and let them fall into the destruction they have plotted for me. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, and divide and scatter those who are joined together against me. Amen. And now, today I'm going to be talking about The Simpsons, and also read a selection from vox-day's book, SJW's Always Double Down. And now the selection on The Simpsons.
For the American immigrant success story, and yet you're apologizing for it. I mean, it's remarkable. It really is. It really is. But this is the world we're in now. I mean, I wonder how long it is before they just start pulling. You think this is crazy? They're going to start pulling episodes of The Simpsons off. Start pulling episodes of The Simpsons, off of these streaming services or where. I don't even know, where do you watch The Simpsons? Is it on Hulu or
Disney Plus?
Oh, Disney Plus, yeah. Just give it time. They might start editing these things out, start taking certain characters and getting rid of them. It's a sad thing. And I thought The Simpsons had at least reached that level of cultural, just cultural icon status where we would all agree that's been on the air for, I don't even know, over 20 years, going on almost 30 years now,
I think
right?
it's the longest running show ever. That's where finally Nash.
Yeah, and sure enough, Apu, he's now sad about Apu, the whole thing. It just, I think it's really, it's just a sign of the times, friends. Nothing's. Oh, I watched with the Snow Princess last night. This guy, Nate Bargatze. Producer Mark, have you seen this guy on Netflix?
No, I have not.
He's actually funny.
So, anyways, it's Buck Sexton's show, and he was talking about The Simpsons, and he said there's a guy on there, Hank Azaria, that does he does a lot of voices on The Simpsons, but one of the characters he did was a guy from India named Apu, and so apparently now Mr. Azaria is running around apologizing for voicing this particular character. Why, I don't know, but what it made me think of is, where does this come from? Why are we in a situation now where Mr. Azaria is now apologizing for basically doing his job and voicing a particular character? And where it comes from is called subjectivism. And subjectivism is a philosophical theory that states that basically says you are, and we all are, an island. Every one of us, that we're all completely unique. And you hear this subjectivism being sold to children. Oh, you're completely unique. There's nobody else like you on the face of the earth. And it's crap. It's absolute crap. There's 6 billion people like you on the face of the earth. Are they exactly the same? Do they have exactly the same DNA sequences and stuff? No. But essentially, they're the same. Human beings are all human beings. And the importance of this is that if we succumb to subjectivism, then we cannot communicate with one another. Everything becomes feelings-based. Everything becomes the ideas that Nobody knows or understands who I am. Nobody knows or understands what it is that I feel. Nobody knows or understands what it is that I've been through. And it's not true. It is simply not true. If you're a human being, then there are other human beings on this planet that have gone through the same things that you have gone through, no matter what it is, whether it's shame or degradation or whatever. You're going to find at least one other human being that has been through the same thing you've been through. There's other human beings that feel the same things you feel. A lot of teenagers go through this. In program, we call it terminal uniqueness. And so and again, this is a way of saying that you're so special that in program-wise, that these are people that say, I can't recover from drugs or alcohol because nobody understands me, nobody understands what I've been through, nobody understands what it's like to be in my shoes. And so you have to as an individual, get over that. And you see it a lot with teenagers who tell their parents, you don't understand. And parents should never accept that from their kids. They should be able to say, yes, I do understand. Let me tell you about it. Let me tell you how I understand. That's an opportunity right there to make a connection with your child. Don't pass on it. Don't be intimidated by this you don't understand crapola, because it's just simply not true. I don't care that this is the 21st century and your parents were of the 20th century, or your grandparents were of the 20th century, or maybe even the 19th century. Doesn't matter. We're all human beings, and that's what's fundamental here. This also goes back to what Ayn Rand was talking about with essences. What is the essence of being human, and what are the accidents? And so if you get down to what's essences of being human, again, there's 6 billion other people on this planet, and odds are all 6 billion can relate to whatever it is that you're going through or have been through. Now, this is used on the left. This is the way it swings into a political situation as a source of power. Being black is now a source of power in this country because of subjectivism, the idea that nobody can understand or appreciate what it's like to be black. And that's not the point. Being black is an accident. It is about the essences and essence of being human that counts. And as a fellow human being, yes, I can relate to you as another person. But if you can successfully sell subjectivism, then it puts the individual with a tremendous amount of not authority, but power, just naked power, where you can make objections simply by saying, I'm offended. Okay? The issue in an objective world, in the real world, is was what you were exposed to offensive? Not whether or not you were offended, because I could be offended by anything. Maybe I'm ultra-sensitive, maybe I'm just a liar. And for the sake of power, for the sake of putting you on the spot and making you feel uncomfortable, especially if you're in a position of power, you're a supervisor or a CEO, and I say to you, well, I'm offended, and then I'm daring you to say, no, you're not, which is what I tell people. When anyone says, I'm offended, I say, no, you're not, because I didn't say or do anything offensive. That's the point. Okay, did I do something offensive? If I did, and odds are I will know it, because generally when people say or do things that are offensive, they do it to be offensive. Sometimes they think that being offensive is funny, and sometimes they're doing it to be offensive because they want to make somebody mad. You upset me, so I want to get even, so I'm going to do or say something that is offensive, and I know to be offensive. But going with the offended part, now you have everything is out of control. If you allow that, you and I allow that to happen, where people are coming up, I'm offended, because then you get to the point where I tell somebody, I walk down the hallway at work, and I tell somebody, hi, good morning, and they say, I'm offended. I'm going to human resources. Now what? What do I do now? If I buy into the subjectivist mindset, I'm in trouble. I'm going to have to go to human resources, and I'm actually going to have the spectacle of having to sit down and explain to them how I didn't mean it, or try to explain to them how what I said was really innocuous, but I'm going to have to do the explaining as though I did something wrong, when in reality, I did absolutely nothing wrong. So this, going back to The Simpsons, same thing. Mr. Azaria did absolutely nothing wrong by simply voicing a character. That was what he was hired to do. That's what he was asked to do. If there are people that don't like it, that find it, let's say, distasteful for whatever reason, then they're free not to watch or listen. But they're not free to come out and demand some sort of an apology from Mr. Azaria because they are, quote, offended, unquote. And now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to read a selection from vox-day's book called SJWs Always Double Down, and it is SJWs are social justice warriors. So the narrative can be anything that SJWs believe to be in the interests of furthering social justice, large or small. It can be as big as the national anthem, protests that have invited commentary from NFL owners and players to the league commissioner and President Trump. And it can be as small as a single image announcing the intention to crowdfund a new comic. In either case, the SJW response is almost invariably the same: to mischaracterize the nature of the dispute in a manner designed to discredit and disqualify the individual who has somehow caused the narrative to be questioned. Take the national anthem protests that have swept across the country and now have SJWs and other sympathizers taking a knee everywhere from concert stages and athletic fields to the floor of the House of Representatives. Although they begin as a protest of black oppression and lethal police brutality by former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, a gesture punctuated by his decision to wear socks portraying policemen as pigs and a t-shirt celebrating a 1960 meeting of Malcolm X and Fidel Castro. They are now portrayed by SJWs as demonstrations of unity and opposition to President Trump. But there is no question that the protests, which have ranged from sitting or kneeling during the national anthem to refusing to take the field until after it has been played, are a demonstration of cultural war by blacks against the white American social order and its symbols. Colin Kaepernick has explained as much to NFL media in an interview after a preseason game between the 49ers and the Green Bay Packers on August 26, 2016. I'm not going to stand up, quote, I'm not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street, people getting paid leave and getting away with murder, unquote. Since he opted out of his contract before being cut after the 2016 season, Kaepernick's protest probably would have been entirely forgotten by the time the 2017 season rolled around, were it not for SJWs in the sports media creating a second false narrative. ESPN and other outlets such as Pro Football Talk spent most of the summer and the entire preseason complaining that the quarterback, who remained unsigned by all of the NFL's 32 teams, was only unable to find another job as a backup quarterback due to his unwillingness to speak out about his political views. The media pushed this second narrative hard all summer, claiming that Kaepernick was being blackballed, even though his performance had observably declined since his appearance in Super Bowl whatever it was in 2013. While it wasn't Kaepernick's fault that the 49ers finished 2-14 in 2016, second worst in the league, the truth was that Kaepernick never really recovered from a disastrous 2015 season where he was injured, threw nearly as many interceptions as touchdowns, and saw his QB rating drop from 98.3 in his NFC Championship season to an abysmal 78.3, fifth worst in the league. For the purposes of comparison, it is worth noting that there are 6 quarterbacks with the ratings over 100 that season. So, it was hardly surprising that in a sport where the quarterback is the most important player on the field by far, no quarterback-needy teams were willing to sign a player who not only appeared to be in decline, but was clearly inclined to put himself and his political views ahead of the team and its interests. Moreover, Kaepernick, like Tim Tebow and Robert Griffin III, was more of an athlete than a proper quarterback and required an offense designed to support his strengths and to conceal his limitations, which no professional team will ever do for a backup quarterback. Given that neither Tim Tebow nor Griffin, both of whom were also playoff quarterbacks in 2011 and 2013 respectively, are still playing in the NFL, the media's narrative that Kaepernick was being denied employment solely or even primarily due to his views simply is not credible. This did not prevent the SJW coverage sports media from fostering the Kaepernick as martyr for free speech narrative by publishing gushing profiles with titles such as, quote, Colin Kaepernick was the start of what can be a better NFL, unquote. Quote, we need more from white athletes than gestures, unquote. Quote, Aaron Rodgers believes Colin Kaepernick's protests are the reason he's unsigned, unquote. And, quote, the NFL can no longer hide from the Colin Kaepernick movement, unquote. But if the second narrative was unable to shame any NFL coaching staff into signing the controversial player, it did suffice to inspire 2 more players into action on Kaepernick's behalf. In Week 1, 5 players protested, including the 3 that had been protesting the previous season. Michael Bennett of the Seahawks, Robert Quinn of the Rams, Eric Reed of the 49ers, who had been kneeling beside Kaepernick from the start. The 5 players had a modicum of physical support from a handful of their teammates, particularly Reed, who was flanked by 4 of his standing teammates laying their hands on him. The media did its best to build up public support for the protest, as SB Nation provided a roundup of all the protests throughout the league, complete with pictures. Mike Florio of Football Talk complained that Kaepernick still did not have a job, while Scott Tolzien, the second-string quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, did. Sports Illustrated devoted an entire story to a reporter wearing a Kaepernick jersey to a game, while Fox Sports gave anthem protester Michael Bennett a platform to lecture NFL fans about social justice on its Sunday pregame show, as well as helping him launch a podcast called Head to Head. A few days later, the media was equally busy denying the possibility that all of this political activity in lieu of actual football had anything to do with the fact that the Week 1 television ratings declined from 12 to 28%. Even the fact that the worst decline was on the most conservative networks, Fox, wasn't sufficient to convince them that defending the false narrative of Colin Kaepernick's victimhood was at least partially responsible for turning away viewers. Enter Donald Trump. As a few more players cheered on by the media joined the initial protesters in Week 2, the president, never slow to sense when his opposition had planted its flag on shaky rhetorical ground, struck hard and fast with comments at a political rally in Alabama that shook the football world. Quote, wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, quote, get that son of a bitch off the field right now. Out. He's fired. He's fired, unquote. You know, some owner is going to do that. He's going to say, quote, that guy that disrespects our flag, he's fired, quote, unquote. And that owner, they don't know it, they'll be the most popular person in this country, unquote. As the president no doubt anticipated, the media and the players immediately doubled down. As the media uniformly shrieked in outrage and denounced Trump's comments as unpresidential, the players sported black shirts with hashtag I'm with Cap on them in their pregame warm-ups. 180 players kneeled during the national anthem. 3 whole teams remained in their locker rooms until after the anthem was over, and 2/3 of the owners issued statements that either condemned the president or expressed support for the players' protest, which was now increasingly directed at the president as well as at the anthem and the flag. The NFL even ignored its own game operations manual in favor of releasing a mealy-mouthed statement condemning the president's comments for being divisive. Quote, the national anthem must be played prior to every NFL game, and all players must be on the sideline for the national anthem. During the national anthem, players in the field and bench area should stand at attention, face the flag, hold helmets in their left hand, and refrain from talking. The home team should ensure that the American flag is in good condition. It should be pointed out to players and coaches that we continue to be judged by the public in this area of respect for the flag and our country. Failure to be on the field by the start of the national anthem may result in discipline, such as fines, suspensions, and or forfeiture of draft choices for violations of the above, including first offenses. That's, unquote, the NFL Game Operations Manual. In a beautiful example of defending the narrative through sophistry and deception, the media rushed to debunk reports that emerged on social media claiming the NFL rules required the players to be on the field and stand for the anthem because, as it turned out, it was actually just the NFL policies laid out in the operations manual instead of the rule book. Either way, the NFL promptly declared that regardless of whether it was a rule or policy that had been so publicly violated, the NFL had no intention of disciplining anyone for disrespecting the flag, the anthem, the military, the veterans, the fallen, the nation, and the president. And on a day that had been decreed Gold Star Mother's Day in 1936, the NFL's half-hearted appeal to free expression may have been more convincing had it not prevented the Dallas Cowboys from honoring 5 Dallas police officers murdered at a Black Lives Matter protest in 2016 and threatened to fine 6 players who wore cleats on September 11 in remembrance of the victims of the terror attacks 16 years before. As it was, literally no one even pretended to buy it, despite heroic efforts on the part of the media, SJWs, to sell the NFL and its commissioner, Roger Goodell, as unlikely champions of free speech. It was no surprise to me or anyone else who paid attention to Trump's electoral campaign to observe that the president had clearly anticipated the firestorm of criticism he provoked. Indeed, I believe he was expecting the media, the players, and the league to aggressively double down in the way that they did because, as I witnessed in the case of the rabid puppies and the Hugo Award, the immediate reaction of SJWs called out in public is to cry foul, to summon reinforcements, and to try to intimidate the opposition by a public show of apparent mass support. And while the response by the players, the media, and the NFL was impressive, it was overwhelmed by the massive demonstration of disapproval by NFL spectators, who are not only disproportionately made up of Trump supporters, but are arguably the most patriotic flag-waving Americans this side of NASCAR. The NFL's rhetoric about unity, racial harmony, and free expression was about as effective as the defense of the winless 2008 Detroit Lions, as an explosion of outrage among NFL fans led to a rapid drop in game attendance, television viewers, approval ratings, and merchandise sales. Consider the immediate short-term consequences. Sunday Night Football down 15%. Sunday afternoon games down 19%. 34% of Americans are less likely to watch the game. President Trump's approval ratings goes up. The Ravens Stadium immediately erupted in boos when the team kneeled before the national anthem. And in Atlanta, 10 minutes into the third quarter in a 14-10 game, most of the seats were empty. The Green Bay Packers and Pittsburgh Steelers in particular each had received significant blowback from their fan bases and sponsors. In other words, this was an absolute devastating trap set for the SJWs in the media and the league office by an expert rhetorician who knew that SJWs are always predisposed to aggressively defend their narrative. It was rather like watching an army allowed to dangerously extend itself on a strategic map, then hit hard in the flank, cut off, and surrounded by a brilliant enemy general. The entire episode was a veritable masterclass in rhetorical strategy. By the next week, the number of protesting players had fallen dramatically. The National Basketball Association announced that any attempt to protest the national anthem would be met with discipline from the league office, and it only appears to be a matter of time before the NFL itself is going to be forced to publicly retreat from its unpopular position. At least one member of the sports media, Jason Whitlock, understood how the president played the media, the NFL, and the players perfectly due to his ability to predict their actions. On the MMQB podcast with Peter King, Whitlock said, quote, "He baited us, and they fell for it unbelievably. Oh my God, he says we shouldn't kneel, so let's everybody kneel together. Let's show Donald Trump. These guys are involved in a business where they make millions of dollars, and Trump just baited them into being adversarial with their customer base," unquote. One of the most remarkable things about the determination, or rather the psychological need of SJWs to defend their narrative at all costs, is the way in which they will do so without hesitation, even as the narrative itself mutates in real time. I witnessed literally hundreds of examples of this personally when in late September 2017, the publishing house for which I am the lead editor, Castalia House, announced a crowdfunding campaign for its new graphic novel series called Alt Hero. I created the series in response to many requests from comics fans who were in despair at the complete convergence of the comics industry, which is addressed later in this book. The plan was to Fox News, Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, and the various lesser players in the industry, just like Roger Ailes did when he founded Fox News and rapidly became the top news channel due to having 50% of the American TV watching public to himself, while all the other stations battled among themselves for the other 50%. The difference is that Marvel, the industry leader, has pulled the comics industry so far to the left as a result of a complete takeover by SJWs that their various series no longer hold any appeal to about 3/4 of the potential comics reading audience. As always, the challenge is in the execution, but there can be no denying that the opportunity is an incredible one. And somewhat to my surprise, I discovered that SJWs in the industry even appear to be dimly aware of their extreme vulnerability now, but that didn't prevent them from defending the narratives and doing what SJWs always do: lie, double down, and project. When they became aware of the unlikely challenge being posed to their dominance of the comics industry. Unlike video games and science fiction, SJWs consider the comics to have been their turf from the start. They particularly revere Jack Kirby, an influential artist who worked closely with Stan Lee at Marvel and helped create some of the most famous superheroes and supervillains, including the Fantastic Four and the Hulk, etc. They regard Kirby, a World War II veteran with a penchant for unlikely tall tales, as a proto-SJW, science fiction SJW, turned Marvel writer Saladin Ahmed even described Kirby as, quote, the original comic book social justice warrior, unquote, and praised him for being the first comic book artist to draw black and Asian characters. I didn't know much about comics, but due to the success of Castalia House in both fiction and nonfiction, I've been hearing more and more from the comic book fans in despair over the increasing convergence of the industry and the way in which their favorite characters were being disappeared and replaced by perverse SJW versions. Let's see here. So in April 2017, I announced that Castalia House was working on a new comic which I named Alt Hero, to reflect the fact that heroic values of the past were now deemed an alternative by the converged mainstream. I also mentioned that while we planned to crowdfund the comic, we would not be using Kickstarter due to the probability that Kickstarter would respond to complaints by SJWs by shutting down the campaign. So more on that later. I did want to say that my take on this, particularly the Colin Kaepernick situation, is that the left always, this is something that he missed. Again, I like vox-day and I like his books because he has depth. Most of the people like Sean Hannity are about as deep as a mud puddle. Everything to them is politics, and their attitude is if we can get our politics right, everything else will fall into place, and it's just not so. With Colin Kaepernick, one of the things that the left promotes culturally is impulsivity, that you should act on your feelings. And so whatever you happen to feel at any given moment is the way you should act, not stopping and thinking and considering alternative courses of action before you decide, but just act impulsively. So here's Colin Kaepernick. He's just been demoted to second string. He was a superstar. He was in, and I remember this vividly, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, him and all of his crappy-ass tattoos, and they think he's the best thing since buttered bread, and that he's probably going to go on and be a Hall of Famer and all this stuff. Now all of a sudden he's second string. So he's pissed off. And so he decides impulsively, he's unhappy and he's pouting about it, and he decides, screw it, I'm not standing for the national anthem. not because of any social justice warrior notions, but simply as a personal expression of frustration, petulance, because he's a petulant little kid at the end of the day. He's petulant and peevish. And so he goes and he takes the knee. Now, he knows that he's going to have to answer to the media, that the news people, so-called news people, are going to be asking him questions. What did you do? Why did you do it? Etc. So while he's kneeling there, I imagine that's when he got flashed on this idea. Aha. Here's a way that not only I can get revenge on the team, but I can get revenge against the whole entire NFL in one fell swoop. I just make up a story that I went ahead and kneeled in respect or solidarity with all of the people that have been killed by police officers and police actions over the years. And so then not only am I not going to be seen as what I really am, a petulant small child, but I'm going to become some kind of a hero. Unfortunately, didn't get him a job anywhere, but again, when you act impulsively and that's the way you live your life, you end up having to spend a lot of time cleaning up messes. And that's what is, at the end of the day, Colin Kaepernick and the NFL and others that followed that lead are ending up having to do. Again, they make a mess. Their attendance is down, so therefore they can't charge as much for advertising, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, they end up making a mess and doing it on impulse, not because they stopped and thought this through. And that's the movement, basically, was what it means. Act on impulse. Don't stop and think. Don't look at things critically. Don't, look or analyze alternative courses of actions. Just lock yourself into one particular behavior and go forward regardless. And again, what ends up happening is a disaster. And you end up having to spend a lot of time cleaning up the mess. So then now the NFL is going to have to try and find a way to, what the left refers to, walk it back. Okay, at first the NFL is all about being defiant. That's another characterization of the left, and their penchant for impulsivity is defiance. If you come out and point out to them, hey, you're a moron because you're ankle deep in doo-doo, they're simply going to go tell you to go jump in a lake. And my attitude is fine. You like doo-doo, you go ahead and stand in it. I will go ahead and jump in a lake to get away from you and the stench. But again, so NBA's having to walk it back. Other organizations are having to walk all this back very quietly. Of course, they're not going to come out and make bold pronouncements because they're gutless. But the point is, how did they get in the soup in the first place? How did they get in the doo-doo in the first place? Is because they weren't looking where they were going. Kaepernick acted impulsively, and everybody else followed suit. Bing, 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 bing. The news people put pressure on the NFL. The NFL acted impulsively. The news media put pressure on the NBA and put on pressure on everybody else, and they reacted impulsively. And again, they end up getting what they so richly deserve, which is a loss in terms of ratings and in terms of their fan base. So that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.